all across the diocese and was at a wonderful parish of the Epiphany of the Lord in Oklahoma City. And I did some pilgrimages during that time, and one of them was to Poland and Prague. We did the footsteps of now St. John Paul and St. Faustina and St. Maximilian Kolbe. And then the last leg was to go to Prague. And we had Prague's a beautiful city, and we went to the shrine of the original infant of Prague. And it was there I had Mass, and we knelt before the infant there, and I prayed, Lord, I'm open to anything you want from me. I would just like to have a parish. And I came back home, and we continued back with what I was doing, and about a month later, the Archbishop called me to his office, and he said, I want to give you an assignment. The assignment's coming up. I said, okay, wonderful. He said, I want you to go to Prague. In Oklahoma, we call it Prague. The infant of Prague at Prague. It was originally called Praha, the original pronunciation of the Czech Republic capital. Then they thought that was too ethnic, so they called it Prague, and then they got Okiized to Prague. So he said, I want you to go to Prague and be the pastor of St. Wenceslas Parish in Prague, St. Michael's Parish in Meeker. So those are my two parishes. The parish is kind of small. Prague is about 85 families, and Meeker is about 21 families. So collectively it's about 150 people, so it's very small. But it also means becoming a rector of the National Shrine. Now the National Shrine last year had 75,000 visitors. So it's a lot of folk who come. Yeah. And it's the best kept secret in Oklahoma, if not the Midwest. It's one of the only, the nearest national shrine. There's a small one up in Missouri for the miraculous medal. Then there's the shrine of St. Therese down in the little flower down in San Antonio, and then St. Juan of de los Lagos in Brownsville, Texas. Those are the only ones that are in the Midwest right there. So we're sandwiched right in the middle of it. So I thought, wow. Jesus took me at his word. So I said, okay. I didn't know a lot about the infant, so I really had to do a lot of study and even become familiar with the whole Czechoslovakian history. You know, how does Prague work in, and what's the Bohemian people versus the Czech people versus the Slovak people, and how does that all play out? So I had to do a lot of history. The ultimate issue is in the 10th century, a Spanish monk of the Basilian order, St. Basil's order, saw a vision of the infant Christ, a toddler, in his room. He carved the image. He died right after that, dropped dead. The friars, the monks, took this carved image, coated in wax, preserved it. Eventually that got in the hands of St. Teresa of Avila, St. Teresa of Jesus, who put replicas in all the houses. She and John of the Cross were formerly the Carmelite order in Spain. Eventually, she took the original and gave it to the crown of Spain, to the crown family, the royal family of Spain. And the queen, Queen Marinke, gave it to her daughter, Princess Polyaxana, whom they had betrothed to the Grand Duke of Bohemia. So when Polyaxana went to Prague to marry, she took the statue with her as part of her dowry. She took the devotions that the royal family had had with her, and she took it there. And she kept her devotions going in the royal palace. Eventually, things she needed to do something else with it, she took it and gave it to the friars in the Carmelite church at Prague. And she said, this is the most prized possession we have. I know that the more you honor him, the more he will bless you. And she left it there. And they were probably like, well, thank you, Your Royal Majesty, but we don't know what to do with this, because they had no devotion. Ultimately, they created devotion, making the long story very short. When the Spaniards came to America with Christopher Columbus, they brought that with them. They had an infant with them, and they brought it to the New World, and it got transferred here. Now, when the Czechoslovakians came to America in the late 1800s, certainly to Oklahoma, they brought some of those devotions with them as well. Now, in the 1940s, the local pastor, our parish is St. Wenceslas in Vaclav. It's always been under his patronage. The parish is more than 100 years old. It was founded in 1892. He needed to build a new church after World War II. He had no money. And so they asked, he went to the local bishop and he said, I don't have any money and I need to build a church. And the bishop said, well, raise it. Well, he had money after World War II. He was introduced by the Mercy Sisters to this devotion to the infant of Prague. The more you honor me, the more I'll bless you. So they gave him a statue. He put it in church at 1947. The story says in 1947, at Christmas time, he stopped in front of the statue and he said, okay, do something. Simple prayer. Within months, he had enough money to build the church. So he went back to the bishop, he said, I can build my church. They pushed it on to the infant. Bishop said, what do you have in mind? I said, I don't know, change the name of the church. Bishop said, no, you're not thinking broad enough. You need to think about the possibility of creating a shrine. Because communism swept through Europe, the Czechoslovakians can't go back to Prague, but they could come to Prague. So why don't you write to Rome and get permissions to establish a shrine? So he did. So this year is our 65th anniversary. So the issue is, when we look at a crucifix, that's a little scary to some people. That's a man who died, you know? We don't see crucifixions. They stopped at 313 when Constantine legalized the church. A dead corpus is not friendly to people, but we can all relate to a baby. We can all relate to a toddler. We all see toddlers running around. There's something calming about an infant. But in the monk who we don't even know the monk's name, who carved this image. When he carved the image, he carved it in the fullness of who he is. His left hand is open to hold a globe, so he's a god. He holds the world in his hand. His right hand is raised in a priestly blessing, so it shows he's a priest. And in time, he was crowned. There's some question about who crowned him first. I think it's probably the Habsburgs, because Prague was one of the capitals of the Habsburg Empire. No one moved without the Habsburgs saying yes. So I think probably the Habsburgs crowned him first, is my theory. So he's crowned as a king. Because who did the Magi come looking for? They don't come looking for a baby. They come looking for the newborn king. So in his infancy, he's king, God, and priest. So he's the fullness of who he is, even as a baby. So that's what we come to honor. We come to honor Jesus Christ in the fullness of who he is as priest, God, and king, wrapped up in this baby, this infant, this toddler. And so people come to recognize that when they come to Prague. And they come all the time. They come constantly. This time of year especially, now that school's out, between now and September, we will be constantly have a flow of people coming through the shrine. We're located right between two interstates, between I-40 and I-44. And so we're right between them, and people flood in all the time. And it's a great blessing. There's miracles that happen there all the time. The Infant of Prague has 9 different devotions, from children to finances to good health to schools. So he just really has a recourse to all kinds of things.
I want you to explain a bit more about that, the issue of devotions and the promise of blessings after devotions. Explain both to our non-Catholic viewers as well as our Catholics, to make sure that we're catechized correctly, to understand we're not talking about magic, we're not talking about superstition, we're not expecting God to have an obligation to us because we did this, therefore God, you owe me this. I mean, talk about how we understand that accurately.
Yes. Yeah. It's a matter, we don't, again, one of the fallacies of Catholicism that we worship statues or we worship graven images. We don't do that. The issue in Latin, we talk about that we have latria, which is true worship of God alone. We give worship to God alone in the Trinitarian being of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But we honor, which the word is dulia, we honor the saints. We honor them. Just like in our nation recently, we celebrate Memorial Day. We honor those men and women who had fought bravely to defend us and our liberties. So we honor them. And then the church calls what we're doing is hyperdulia to one person alone, the super saint, the Blessed Virgin Mary, because she did something no other human being on earth has ever done. She gave birth to God. So we give worship to God, honor to the saints, but super honor to the Virgin Mary. And their images in the church is just that. We honor these people. It's much like you and I probably have pictures of our mother in our house, right? And you probably have pictures of your wife and your son in your office, right? Your children. We're not worshiping them. We're not bowing down, but it's to remind us of who they are and how important they are in our lives. So we do that. You've got a bust of now St. John the 23rd over there. We don't worship him, but we honor who he is and what he did for the life of the church. And so when we come before an image of the infant of Christ, we're not bowing down to it to worship it, but it's to remind us of who Jesus was, what Jesus did in his infancy. And to remind us also that God is outside of time. And so because God is outside of time, he can see Jesus in his incarnation, at the crucifixion, and at the end of time simultaneously. So when we go and we honor Jesus in his infancy, it's as if he was just born at Christmas. That's why at Christmas, when we celebrate Christmas, we can put a creche out. We can put the manger scene out, and it's the reality of what we are celebrating. Huh? And that's why at Easter, we don't say Easter is a resurrection of 2,000 years ago. We celebrate Jesus Christ is risen today as we sing. Huh? And so to honor the infant Christ, it's not something that happened yesterday, it happens now.
Right now.
It's happening right now. We honor the infant now because he is born today. He is always born in the here and now.
And those images remind us both of a quality in the person that they represent, but they also then remind us of a quality that's supposed to be in us.
Yes.
When we look at the crucifix, we see the love of God who completely gave himself. No greater love than
Right.
man. But we also see in that how we're supposed to
Absolutely.
live.
Yes.
So when we see the infant of Prague,
Well, it's to remind us what Jesus said. Unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
So we must have those childlike qualities. And to look at the baby Jesus, the infant Christ, and say, oh, we are supposed to become like him. in the tenderness, that simplicity, that so childlike qualities of this, to run to mama. That beautiful scene in the Passion of Christ when Jesus falls on the road of Calvary and Mary starts running to him. She has that flashback, that very first time that he falls. And she is running and stretching out her arms. That tenderness of that child that falls. We're supposed to be that child. Yes.
we have an email, Dennis